Welcome back to the YouTube channel. I'm Xavier Smith, and today I'm going to teach you how to graph a fully transformed sine graph. So let's start with just the sine graph. Let's review it. So, sine, we're going by pi over 2. The period of sine is 2 pi. It takes a full 2 pi, full circle, for a full graph of sine to go by. So, at 0, what's the y value? Because sine is y. 0 is 0. So 0 is a point. Pi over 2, the sine is 1. Pi over 2 is 1. We are just graphing 5 points. The 5 major points of each graph of tangent, cosine, and sine will give you what it looks like. So just 5 points, and they're very easy to find. Pi, well, the sine is 0. 3 pi over 2, sine is -1. And then 2 pi, our sine is again 0. So we get this little graph. Again, our period is 2 pi. And then we have 3 x-intercepts. We could put a little arrow on both sides to say that it keeps going because it's continuous. Because then next you would have 5 pi over 2. And our midline is y equals 0 because that's where we keep coming back to these intercepts. Now let's talk about the transformations that can happen with transforming sine. So our standard form of sine is y equals a sine b of x minus h plus k. So our a is our amplitude, which is our height from the midline. Then b determines our length of a period. And here you see our period is 2 pi over b. We just said our period of just normal sine is 2 pi. It takes a full circle for one graph of sine to go by, and then it keeps going every 2 pi. It'll repeat itself. So 2 pi over b means if this b is 2, 2 pi over 2 will pop. Our period would just be pi. So it would be cut in half. If this b was 1/2, then our period would be doubled, and it would be 4 pi would be a period. So that's an example. Our h is our horizontal shift, and our k is our vertical shift. So again, our period is the time it takes for a cycle to fully happen or pass, usually 2 pi divided by b. Our b is what changes our period. So if our b is 2, period's pi. If our b is 1/2, our period is 4. So 1/2 makes our period bigger. It draws out and elongates the cycle. But if our period is a whole number like 1 or 2 or 3, then the period gets smaller and, the cycle gets smaller, it gets quicker, it collapses. So our scale, how to find scale? So our first point, we have to have 5 points, 5 major points. Our first point is our horizontal shift. So is this h value, is our horizontal shift. And then we have to do our second point is 1/4 times the period plus the horizontal shift. So we're already at the horizontal shift. That horizontal shift, this plus horizontal shift just means we're at the horizontal shift. Then if we have our period, which is our length for a full cycle, and our period, we need the full cycle. So our 1/4 times the period will give us, well, our first point is here, and then we need 5 points. So there's 4 more points. But from this start point, it is one cycle till the end point. You're ending at, same place in the cycle. So 1/4 would mean, well, you're at the start point and you're just taking 1/4 of the full period and getting that second point. Then you're taking 1/2 of the period and getting that point. Then 3/4 of the period, then the full period. So let's do an example of fully transforming sine. This is not flipped negative. There should be another video on this channel talking about flipping sine, cosine, and tangent negative. So let's start. What is our equation is y equals 3 sine 2 of x plus pi over 2 plus 1. So our amplitude is, this a value is 3. Our b value is 2. And when we're looking for our period, again, it's 2 pi over b. So 2 pi over 2 equals pi. So our period is pi. Then our horizontal shift is, there's a plus pi over 2 here, meaning it is minus pi over 2 is our horizontal shift. Then our vertical shift is this k value, it is 1. Then our midline is the same as this vertical shift. So it used to be, if there's no vertical shift, our midline is y equals 0. But now, since we shifted 1 up, our midline is y equals 1. So let's draw that in there, which is just a dashed line showing that you come back to that. Do not go back to this x-axis. Only go back to this line now. Only go back to the midline. So our midline is y equals 1. And now our scale. Again, when we're looking for a scale, our first point, let's just say first, is our horizontal shift. So it's negative pi over 2. Then second is 1/4 times the period plus, well, minus pi over 2 because it's plus our horizontal shift. So it'll be 1/4 times, our period is pi minus pi over 2, which would then be pi over 4 minus, if we want a common denominator, pi over 2 is really 2 pi over 4. So minus 2 pi over 4 equals negative pi over 4. So let's start. We could say this is negative pi over 2, negative pi over 4, 0, because, well, 0 is just always going to be there. Our next point, we're going to do 1/2. I'm not going to put this on the board. We're just going to do it in our head. 1/2 times our period, which is pi, minus pi over 2. 1/2 times pi is pi over 2. Pi over 2 minus pi over 2 is 0. So 0 is our next point. Then is 3/4 times our period, which our period is pi. 3/4 times pi is 3 pi over 4, minus pi over 2 is the same as saying 3 pi over 4 minus 2 pi over 4 will equal pi over 4. So you should start to see a pattern here. We have negative pi over 2, then negative pi over 4, then 0, then pi over 4. We are moving pi over 4 each time. So our scale is pi over 4. Then again, we need 5 points. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So then this last point will be pi over 2. And you should be able to check that from this point, from your start point to your last fifth point, it should equal your period. So negative pi over 2, 2 pi over 2 is pi. So that is our period. So let's start. We know the sine graph. When it's sine of, we're just going to say this is the start. So this is really sine of 0, but it's just shifted over negative pi over 2. So sine of 0, again, is 0. So we're at that midline. Remember to be at that midline. Then we move over. So the next one, we go from 0 then to 1. It goes up first. But when we go from 0 to 1 at negative pi over 4, we should really be going up 3 because that's our amplitude. So we have, instead of moving up 1 to 2, we have to move up 3 to 4. And again, this will look weird as negative pi over 2 and negative pi over 4 because it's compressed. So this negative pi over 4 is really pi over 2. But that's for another video if you need more explanations. Then, since we just went up, we go back to the midline in our sine graph. Just remember what our sine graph looks like. It looks like this. So we go up first, then down, then back. So up, down, at pi over 4, we have to go 3 down from the midline. So 1, 2, 3 will give us negative 2. And then at pi over 2, we will have to go back up. So each point, your starting point in sine is always going to be at the midline. Then it is going to go up your amplitude, unless your amplitude is negative, then it'll go down. But it'll start at the midline, then second point, it'll go up your amplitude amount from the midline. Then next point, go back to the midline. Then next point, it'll be your amplitude down from the midline. And then your last point will be back on the midline. So our graph looks like this. I hope that was helpful. Please let me know if you have any more questions. There should be videos on cosine and tangent coming out soon. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it.